All right, Saagar, what are you looking at?
Well, the grim future of an Elizabeth Warren presidency was put on very full display this weekend in a series of deep dives into her campaign. The first began with a New York Times write-up on the fluid nature of the 2020 Democratic primary, wherein the Massachusetts senator is apparently trying to contrast herself with Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, and Bernie Sanders by vowing to wear a pink Planned Parenthood scarf during her inaugural address, sprinkling her campaign stump speeches with references to gender. I cannot think of a more perfect symbol for how I've described her before, as one whose presidency is almost certain to be marked by a failure to pass any substantive legislation on health care and financial reform, while issuing a flurry of woke social justice executive orders that will rip this country in half along cultural lines. She is increasingly making it clear that despite her rhetorical flourishes calling for Medicare for all, she falls far closer to Joe Biden's theory of the case than she does a Bernie Sanders. So just listen to this exchange with voters over the weekend in which she touts her so-called public choice for phase 1 of her health care plan rather than the full transition.
From what I understand, Medicare for All right now has a supplemental, is that correct? There is no Medicare for All right now. No, but Medicare period, even the Frenchism, there is a supplemental. So
no, this one, no, what we're putting together is just, it's complete healthcare coverage for all the basics. No, it doesn't cover things like cosmetic surgery and other things like that. But it's to cover basic healthcare, just so everybody knows. That includes vision, it includes dental, it includes hearing, and it includes the all-important long-term care.
Her entire health care plan is designed to reap the electoral benefits of calling something Medicare for all while basically proposing a robust public option. Now remember, her so-called transition plan calls for a Biden or Pete care in the first 3 years of her presidency before hopefully trying to pass a follow-on bill in the third year of her presidency, and somehow finding some time for immigration reform there. So this is simply fantasy. As I've said here before, she just doesn't believe healthcare is the #1 threat to the daily lives of the American worker. She was marked in the fights of the 2008 financial crisis. She believes that institutional reform in that regard is what's needed. The problem, of course, is that healthcare is the #1 concern of Democratic voters, and her transition plan revealed just how unserious about it that she is, hence her massive drop in the poll numbers. So Warren's singular focus on financial issues highlights another grim feature of her presidency, and that is a return to a largely neocon, Washington-centric foreign policy. Journalist Zed Jelani, he's commented on this show before that Warren appears to basically be running for Secretary of the Treasury more than president, especially given how little that she talks about foreign policy. So as he so aptly put it, when you don't have anything to say on a topic, it almost just gets colored in by whatever the establishment wants whenever you're in power. And she let the cat out of the bag this weekend in a Guardian op-ed. It's titled, quote, "Donald Trump has destroyed American leadership, I'll restore it." The op-ed whines about how Trump alienated the NATO alliance, it bashes him for meeting with autocrats from Moscow and Pyongyang, and it questions questioning international agreements that the U.S. is party to. Now, I swear, I've heard all these criticisms from a Morning Joe panel or a CNN expert analysis with the likes of Max Boot and Richard Haass over at the Council on Foreign Relations. The entire op-ed is a dream come true for the cable news syndicate it could have been written by a foreign policy speechwriter for George W. Bush or Hillary Clinton. She literally writes, quote, "As president, I will recommit to our alliances diplomatically, militarily, and economically." Heard that one before. The sheer normalcy of this op-ed is what should scare you. Normalcy means a default to the military-industrial complex, to the current system of subsidizing the entire world at the expense of the U.S. taxpayer, and above all, it's a lack of critical thinking about America's position in the world and how to use its military might to effect major change. All of this is to say, Elizabeth Warren has thought very deeply about one thing: financial power in this country. And I don't think any of us have any doubts about that. But her total embrace of women's march identity politics, playing political games on where she stands on healthcare, and then a neocon light foreign policy shows that she basically wants to please the establishment so badly that she is almost certain to be co-opted by them if she were to ascend to the presidency.
No doubt about it.
It's that foreign policy op-ed that really showed it. It's like, oh, you don't have a foreign policy. You basically digested whatever the hot criticism of Trump is in the mainstream and then decided to double down on that. I mean, it actually used to be a more leftist position to say we should go and meet with our enemies like Moscow. I mean, how can you reconcile yourself with meeting people from Moscow and Pyongyang and also want to get back into the Iran deal? How do you deal with it? You have to deal with your enemies. How do you say, oh, I'm going to fulfill our NATO alliance commitments? I'm like, are you, like, what? Like, we're not talking about military spending. We're not talking about the fact that we subsidize so much of the world, its nuclear umbrella and their international defense. Again, she didn't think about any of this. She just decided to spit it out in reference to the president's European trip.
Here's how the thinking went. I've got to show that I can be a commander-in-chief. So let me tee up whoever my standard issue foreign policy advisor is to help me draft an op-ed that shows I'm thinking about these world issues. And as you so aptly put it, if you do not have a firmly, aggressively oppositional stance to the military-industrial complex, you will just get rolled, and you will end up having the same foreign policy as George W. Bush or Barack Obama or now Donald Trump.
It's right there. It's in front of your eyes. That's exactly. Recommit to our alliances. What does that mean? That means everything that we currently do, right? She's like, I want to get out of Afghanistan. I'm like, well, you actually need, have a pretty rigid ideology.
Yeah, are you going to meet with the Taliban? Right? I mean, really, that's
you want to talk about meeting with autocrats? I mean, there you go. These are the most religious autocrats in the world. Probably have to meet with them if we ever want to get the hell out of that country.
That's exactly right. We're going to talk more about this later, but the Washington Post has just revealed the way that we've been systematically lied to about Afghanistan with administration after administration. So again, if you do not come in saying, absolutely, I will put an end to this now, come hell or high water, and be willing to pay the price from every national security official leaking on you and saying you're endangering the nation and you're going to kill everybody, et cetera, et cetera. If you are not willing to pay that price, we will end up in Afghanistan for another 10 years. We'll end up in more foreign wars, the same military adventurism that got us where we've gotten. But I also have to pause and note the pink scarf detail, which is just so amazing. Let's not forget that. She also has a new interview where she got asked about like her VP pick and how she feels about Kamala Harris. She says she really misses Kamala's voice in the race and she's going to do everything she can to lift up Kamala's voice. Like, what are you talking about? She floats her for VP and also says she's considered Joe Biden. It just shows you, look, she is more progressive than your standard issue Democrat. She is, right? Her ideas are not the same as Hillary Clinton, but she is well within the system. And when you remain within the system, you get the same results ultimately that any other politician operating within the system is going to get.
It's just so performatively woke. It's like, I'm going to wear this pink scarf to stick it to the Midwest. I'm like, good luck winning back Michigan or Pennsylvania.
Katie Halper tweeted that
it's like,
if she doesn't wear a pussy hat, it doesn't matter. So.
I'm sure she will.
She'd commit to it. She's ready to go down there. I also love that it's voters at these town halls who are pressing these candidates almost more than the press ever has.
Look at that. Asking her about supplemental insurance on Medicare Part D. Most of these reporters don't even know anything about
Medicare. They've been paying attention. They know the details, and they see the way that she is flip-flopped on this issue, and it matters, obviously.
Because they have to deal with it. They actually have to deal with the Medicare system, or they have to deal with the public bureaucracy, or Medicaid, or any of these other things.
So true.
And whenever you actually have problems with that system, then you're going to ask heart-critical questions.
Indeed.
All right. I'm looking forward to your radar next, Crystal.